Ukrainian flags are raised and celebrations erupt in Kherson city as Russian troops retreat.
After weeks at sea, a humanitarian rescue ship carrying 230 migrants has finally docked in France after Italy refused to accept them.
Ukrainian flags have been raised on official buildings and celebrations erupted in Kherson city as Russian troops retreat. All Russian servicemen crossed to the left bank of the Dnieper River, according to the chief spokesperson for the Russian Ministry of Defense. He also announced that the withdrawal of the Russian troops from the Ukrainian Kherson region was complete.
We did not allow any losses of personnel, weapons, military equipment or material of the Russian troops. All civilians who wished to leave the right bank part of the Kherson region were assisted in the evacuation.
Kherson was the first major urban hub to fall to Russian troops after President Vladimir Putin announced his invasion of Ukraine in February, and it was the only regional capital Russian forces managed to capture.
Kherson returns under control of Ukraine. The Ukrainian military intelligence body said, as it also appealed to Russian troops who have been left behind in Kherson after the withdrawal to give themselves up. Russia's defense ministry has claimed, quote, all Russian service personnel were moved across. There were no losses of man, hardware or material of the Russian forces group. The Kremlin has denied that its withdrawal is a failure, instead calling it redeployment. But the Institute for the Study of War says Ukraine now holds the initiative and is in the process of securing a major victory in the region and in Kherson city, the only regional capital that Russia captured since its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February. Russia had up to 40,000 troops in the region, with half of them being stationed on the west side of the Dnieper River and around Kherson city. The only nearby road crossing from Kherson city to the eastern bank of Dnieper, the Antonivsky Bridge, has been destroyed. Here is a photo by Ukraine's public broadcaster Suspilne. The Institute for the Study of War says the major Ukrainian victory underway in Kherson region will not be Ukraine's last. Fighting will continue on the southern axis, also in Bakhmut, that's Donetsk region, the only place Russian forces are still attempting meaningful offensives, and in northern Luhansk region as Ukrainian forces continue their counter-offensive operations there. The Russian campaigns to capture all these four regions that it claimed to have annexed all culminated a month ago, and Russian forces are firmly on the defensive across most of the front line. The think tank says Russian officials are busy attempting to train 120,000 conscripts to deploy to the front lines in the spring. Ukrainian forces likely aim to liberate as much occupied territory as possible before those Russian reinforcements arrive. The Institute for the Study of War does not assess the fighting in Ukraine will halt or enter a stalemate due to winter weather. It could disproportionately harm poorly equipped Russian forces in Ukraine, but well-supplied Ukrainian forces are unlikely to halt their counteroffensive due to the arrival of winter weather and may be able to take advantage of frozen terrain to move more easy.
After weeks at sea, a humanitarian rescue ship carrying 230 migrants has finally docked in the military port of Toulon in France. The Ocean Viking had initially tried to access an Italian port, which is closest to where the migrants were picked up, stating health and sanitary conditions on board were rapidly deteriorating. But after Italy's refusal, France has decided to allow the migrants to disembark on its shore.
This procedure is carried out within a precise legal framework, which includes a waiting zone. Placement in a waiting zone applies to people of foreign nationality who enter the Schengen zone without fulfilling the legal conditions. People who are taken into custody in a waiting zone are therefore not authorized to enter France's territory and are obliged to remain in this zone under the control of the border police.
In retaliation, France suspended a plan to take in 3,500 refugees currently in Italy, part of a European burden-sharing agreement. Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni slammed the decision as incomprehensible.
90,000 people, slightly less, have disembarked in Italy since the beginning of this year. In the relocation agreement, it is expected that about 8,000 people should be relocated, less than 10%. Well, do you know how many people have been relocated so far? 117, and only 38 in France.
Today, the migrants, including more than 50 children, will be transferred to a holiday center 20 kilometers east of Toulon, which has been declared an international waiting zone. They'll be there for about 20 days while their asylum requests are processed.
Across Europe, people are marking Armistice Day, a day to remember the end of World War I in 1918 and the millions who died. In Paris, French President Emmanuel Macron joined veterans and dignitaries at a commemoration at the Arc de Triomphe. In Belgium, crowds gathered to watch a military parade at a war memorial, which included representatives from other armed forces across Europe. Belgium saw some of the bloodiest battles of the conflict. And in London, Big Ben rang out across the UK's capital for the first time in 5 years, due to an extensive restoration project. The economic outlook for the EU does not look good, as Brussels announced that the 19 countries that use the euro will slide into recession during the winter. The news comes as energy prices continue to rise across the bloc as it moves away from Russian energy.
The potential for further economic disruption due to Russia's war is far from exhausted. The largest threat comes from adverse developments on the gas market and the risk of shortages, especially not this winter, but next winter.
Germany is expected to be the most impacted country across the Eurozone, and it was one of the most dependent nations on Russian natural gas before the war in Ukraine. Inflation is also forecasted to peak near the end of the year, bringing the average rate to 8.5%.
Twitter's new blue tick system, where essentially anyone can buy verification for $8 a month, isn't working exactly as its new owner, Elon Musk, thought it was. Now, previously, to get the mark, you actually had to be verified. You had to be who you said you were. But that's all part of the old regime. Now there are many accounts cropping up on Twitter impersonating companies and famous people without actually being who they say they are. Take this, for example. 2 accounts cropped up of Tony Blair and George Bush, the former British and American leaders, making pretty crass jokes about the Iraq war. This was obviously fake. Even Twitter itself wasn't spared. A fake account cropped up on the site saying that Twitter Blue would now be available for free. Again, completely false. So what is Mr. Musk doing about all of this? Well, he said that going forward from now, all parody accounts need to have that title within their name, although it's uncertain how he'll implement this. There's also another label, official, which may be brought in to show that someone is who they say they are. However, this was actually used a few days ago before being guillotined, so there's some confusion over this, whether this will be rolled out in full. Now, parody on Twitter is nothing new, but it brings the risk of another problem, fake news. Take the example of this BBC journalist. He asks, imagine if there was a terrorist attack. In that case, meanwhile, on Twitter, a bunch of fake accounts crop up, claiming to be emergency services. They put out a lot of fake news, all with the blue tick verification. People believe them, and it spreads like wildfire. He asks the question, what happens in this scenario? And it's a very big possibility. Millions and millions of people around the world use Twitter as their principal source of news information. Parody of existing users is nothing new on the platform, but many people are worried that by giving people blue ticks, it will be harder to distinguish authentic and unauthentic sources of information. In this sort of environment, disinformation can more easily disseminate.